The morning sun was just beginning to rise when Harold Thompson woke up at exactly 6 o'clock a.m., just like he had done for the past 75 years. Even at 93 years old, some habits from his military days never changed. His bones might have gotten older, but his spirit remained as strong as ever. Harold lived in a small blue house on Sater Street that he and his late wife Martha had bought right after World War II. The house wasn't fancy, but it was home. His perfectly kept garden in the front yard was the pride of the neighborhood, with red roses that Martha had planted still blooming every spring. Every morning, Harold followed the same routine. He would put on his pressed khaki pants and a clean white shirt, brush his thin white hair neatly to the side, and pin his World War II veteran pin to his shirt collar. The pin was small, but Harold wore it with pride. It reminded him of his time serving his country in Europe, memories that felt both like yesterday and a lifetime ago. After getting dressed, Harold walked slowly but steadily to his kitchen. His house was filled with photos, some yellow with age, showing a young Harold in his military uniform, Harold and Martha on their wedding day, and pictures of their 3 children who now lived in different states. Each photo told a story, a piece of his long life. The kitchen was spotless, everything in its place. Harold made his breakfast the same way every day: 2 pieces of toast, 1 egg sunny side up, and a cup of black coffee. He ate at his small kitchen table, reading the morning newspaper that young Tommy from next door delivered each morning. At 8 o'clock a.m. sharp, Harold would begin his daily walk to Mary's Diner, 6 blocks away. He used a wooden cane now, but he refused to let anyone drive him. "These legs still work," he would say with a smile whenever someone offered him a ride. The walk took him 30 minutes, twice as long as it used to, but Harold didn't mind. He enjoyed watching the town wake up. Along the way, people would wave and say hello. "Morning, Mr. Thompson." The kids would call out as they rushed to school. Harold knew everyone, and everyone knew Harold. He had lived in this town for so long that he had watched many of these people grow up from babies to adults with their own children. Mary's Diner was like a second home to Harold. The bell above the door would ring as he pushed it open, and Mary herself, now in her 60s, would call out, "Your usual spot is waiting, Harold." His usual spot was the 3rd booth from the door, where he and Martha used to sit together every morning for 40 years. The diner was bright and cheerful, with red and white checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. Harold would order a 2nd cup of coffee and talk with Mary about the town news. He liked hearing about her grandchildren and sharing stories about his own family. What made Harold special wasn't just his age or his veteran status. It was how he treated everyone with kindness. Every Friday, he would bring a box of cookies for the diner staff. On holidays, he would give cards to all the regular customers. He also quietly helped fund the local youth center and would slip money to Mary whenever he heard about a family in town having hard times. Life was peaceful and predictable for Harold, and that's just how he liked it. He had served his country, raised his family, and now he enjoyed his quiet days in the town he loved. The other customers at the diner treated him with respect, and the younger veterans who sometimes came in would sit with him to hear his war stories. Little did Harold know that his peaceful routine was about to change. The old garage across from Mary's Diner, which had been empty for years, was about to get new owners. The rumble of motorcycles would soon break the morning quiet, and Harold's life would take an unexpected turn that would test his courage once again, but in a very different way from his war days. It started on a Monday morning in April. Harold was walking to Mary's Diner as usual when he heard the loud roar of motorcycle engines. 5 large black motorcycles pulled up to the old garage across from the diner. The riders were dressed in black leather jackets with a wolf design on the back. Harold watched as they unlocked the garage doors. The old building had been empty for 2 years since Joe's auto repair closed down. Now it looked like the motorcycle club was moving in. Harold didn't mind change, but something about these men made him uncomfortable. Inside Mary's Diner, everyone was talking about the new neighbors. "They're called the Steel Wolves," Mary told Harold as she poured his coffee. "They bought the garage last week. I hope they don't cause any trouble." Harold nodded quietly, watching through the window as more motorcycles arrived. Over the next few days, the peaceful morning atmosphere changed completely. The bikers would gather early, their motorcycles filling the air with noise. Harold noticed how they watched him as he walked past, some of them smirking at his slow pace and his cane. One morning, a tall biker with a thick beard stepped right in front of Harold, blocking his path to the diner. "Hey, old-timer," the man said, blowing cigarette smoke in Harold's face. Isn't it past your bedtime? His friends laughed loudly. Harold said nothing and walked around him, his heart beating faster, but his face staying calm. The harassment got worse each day. The bikers would rev their engines extra loud when Harold walked by. They would mock his military pin and make jokes about his age. Look at the old soldier boy, they would say. Think he can still fight? More laughter would follow. Inside the diner, things were different. Mary and the regular customers were angry about how the bikers treated Harold, but everyone seemed afraid to do anything. Even Officer Parker, who often had breakfast at the diner, seemed to look the other way when the bikers were mentioned. You should report them, Harold, Mary said one morning, her face worried as she watched the bikers outside. What they're doing isn't right. But Harold remembered dealing with bullies during the war. He knew that sometimes fighting back only made things worse. The situation reached a new low when Harold discovered that the bikers had learned about his routine of carrying cash. Every Friday, Harold would go to the bank and withdraw money for his weekly donations to the youth center and to help families in need. Now, whenever he walked past the garage on Fridays, the bikers would make threatening gestures about his wallet. One particularly bad morning, 3 bikers surrounded Harold near the garage. The leader, whom they called Snake, stepped close to Harold. Must be nice to have all that retirement money, Snake said, his voice cold. Maybe you should share some with us hardworking folks. Harold looked straight into Snake's eyes, remembering the real fear he had faced in the war. This was nothing compared to that. Excuse me, he said firmly, his voice steady. I need to get to my breakfast. He pushed forward with his cane, and surprisingly, the bikers stepped aside, though their laughter followed him to the diner. Inside, Harold sat in his usual booth, his hands shaking slightly as he sipped his coffee. Mary brought him his usual breakfast without him having to order. I called the police again, she whispered. They said they'll look into it, but she didn't finish the sentence. They both knew nothing would be done. As Harold looked out the window at the bikers gathering at their garage, he realized something had to change. He couldn't keep living in fear, and he couldn't let these bullies control his life. In his 93 years, he had faced worse challenges and overcome them. Now, sitting in his favorite diner with his coffee getting cold, Harold Thompson began to form a plan. The situation with the bikers got much worse one rainy Thursday morning. Harold woke up at his usual time, but something felt wrong. When he looked out his front window, his heart nearly stopped. His beautiful garden, the one he and Martha had tended for decades, was completely destroyed. The rose bushes were torn up from their roots. Motorcycle tracks cut deep lines through his flower beds. But what hurt Harold the most was seeing his American flag thrown in the mud, its pole broken in half. Near the flag, he found the old photos from his military service that he kept in his living room. They were scattered across the wet grass, some torn and muddy. Harold's hands shook as he picked up the photos one by one. There was the picture of him and his army buddies in France, another of him receiving his medal for bravery, and the special one of him and Martha at the military ball. Now they were all ruined. Tommy, the newspaper boy, came running up when he saw Harold in the destroyed garden. Mr. Thompson, I saw them do it, Tommy said, out of breath. It was the bikers. They came last night around midnight. I was up late doing homework and saw them from my window. I tried calling the police, but by the time they came, the bikers were gone. Harold thanked Tommy for trying to help. Inside his house, he sat in his old armchair, surrounded by the damaged photos he had collected. His military training had taught him to stay calm in difficult situations, but this felt different. These weren't just things the bikers had destroyed, they were his memories. For the first time in years, Harold didn't go to Mary's diner that morning. Instead, he called Mary to tell her he wasn't feeling well, but Mary already knew what had happened. The whole town is talking about it, Harold, she said. This has gone too far. Even Officer Parker is angry now. Later that afternoon, several people from town came to help Harold clean up his garden. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop brought new rose bushes. Mr. Rodriguez, who owned the hardware store, brought a new flagpole. Even some of the high school students came after school to help replant the flowers. As they worked, Harold watched the garage across from Mary's diner through his window. He noticed something interesting. Not all the bikers were participating in the bullying. Some of them, especially the younger ones, seemed uncomfortable with what was happening. One of them, a young man with a military-style haircut, often looked disapproving when Snake and his closest friends caused trouble. That evening, Harold sat in his study, a room filled with his military medals, maps, and books about strategy. During the war, he had learned that understanding your enemy was the first step to dealing with them. He began to watch the bikers more carefully, but from a distance. Over the next few days, Harold noticed more things. He saw how some bikers wore military boots. He overheard fragments of conversations about deployments and service time. Then it hit him. Many of these men were veterans themselves, just like him, but from different wars. One quiet Sunday, Harold went to the local library and asked Miss Peters to help him research on the computer. They found articles about veteran motorcycle clubs. Many of these groups were started by soldiers returning from recent wars who had trouble fitting back into civilian life. Some found peace and brotherhood in motorcycle clubs. Harold remembered his own difficult times after World War II, how hard it had been to sleep through the night, how loud noises would make him jump, how Martha had helped him through the worst times. These younger veterans didn't seem to have that kind of support. As Harold walked home from the library, his cane tapping on the sidewalk, a plan began to form in his mind. Maybe there was a better way to handle this situation, not with anger or revenge, but with something these young veterans might need more: understanding. That night, Harold made a decision that would change everything. It wasn't the kind of decision people expected from a 93-year-old man who had been bullied and harassed. But then again, Harold Thompson had never been the kind of man who did what people expected. The next morning, Harold did something that surprised everyone. Instead of taking his usual route to Mary's diner, he walked straight to the motorcycle garage. He wore his best blue suit, the one he used for special occasions, and had pinned all his military medals to his jacket. The bikers were just starting to gather for the day. Snake and his friends stopped talking when they saw Harold approaching. Some of them started to smirk, expecting another chance to make fun of the old veteran. But Harold's confident walk and formal appearance made them pause. "Good morning," Harold said in a clear, strong voice. "I'd like to speak with whoever's in charge here." The bikers looked at each other, confused by his direct approach. After a moment, a large man with gray hair stepped forward. Unlike the others, he wore a vest covered with military patches. "I'm Big Mike," the man said. "I run this chapter of the Steel Wolves." He looked at Harold with curiosity rather than hostility. Harold noticed the Vietnam veteran patch on Big Mike's vest and gave him a respectful nod. "My name is Harold Thompson," Harold said, standing as straight as his old bones would allow. "I served in the 101st Airborne Division during World War II. I jumped into Normandy on D-Day, and I fought through France, Belgium, and Germany." The garage had become very quiet. Even Snake and his friends stopped their usual laughing. Some of the younger bikers moved closer to listen. Harold continued speaking, his voice getting stronger with each word. "I see the military boots some of you wear. I recognize the way you stand, the way you watch the streets. I know you're veterans too. Different wars, different times, but we all served our country." Harold paused, looking each biker in the eye. Some of them shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "When I came back from the war," Harold went on, "I was angry. I had nightmares. Loud noises made me want to hide. My wife Martha was the only one who understood. She helped me find my way back to normal life." Several of the younger bikers nodded slightly, understanding exactly what he meant. Then Harold did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an old folded piece of paper. "This is the deed to this garage," he said. "I bought it yesterday from the bank. They were happy to sell it to me because they were worried about how you've been using it." The bikers tensed up. Some of them looked ready for a fight. But Harold held up his hand and continued. "I'm not here to kick you out. I'm here to make you an offer." He pulled out another document. "This is a business proposal. I want to turn this garage into a veteran support center. A place where veterans can meet, talk, get help finding jobs, and support each other. The motorcycle club can stay, but with a new mission: helping other veterans." Big Mike took the paper and started reading. His eyes widened as he saw the details. Harold had already contacted veteran support organizations and arranged for counselors to visit regularly. He had plans for job training programs and even a small coffee shop where veterans could gather. "Why would you do this?" Snake asked, his usual tough guy attitude cracking a little. "After everything we did to you." Harold smiled gently. Because 50 years ago, I was just as lost as some of you are now. Someone helped me then. Now it's my turn to help others. He looked around at the surprised faces. Besides, I'm too old to hold grudges. I'd rather make something good out of this situation. The garage was silent for a long moment. Then Big Mike stepped forward and held out his hand to Harold. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I think we need to talk more about this plan of yours." The news of Harold's offer spread quickly through the small town. That afternoon, Mary's diner was packed with people wanting to hear the story firsthand. Harold sat in his usual booth, drinking coffee, while Big Mike sat across from him. The sight of the elderly veteran and the large biker leader talking quietly shocked many customers. "I served in Vietnam," Big Mike was telling Harold. "Most of our older members are Vietnam vets. The younger ones," he gestured towards Snake and others, "they're from Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of them are having a really hard time adjusting back to normal life." Harold listened carefully as Big Mike explained how many of the younger bikers couldn't hold regular jobs. Some had nightmares so bad they barely slept. Others couldn't stand being in crowded places. The motorcycle club gave them a sense of belonging, but it wasn't enough to help them heal. Snake, Big Mike said quietly, he was a top soldier in Afghanistan. Lost his best friend there. Came back different. The angry attitude, the bullying. It's his way of dealing with pain. Harold nodded, remembering his own dark days after the war. Throughout the day, more bikers came to talk with Harold. A young man named Jeff, who always stood quietly in the background, turned out to be a former army medic. "I can't work in hospitals anymore," he admitted. "Too many memories, but I still want to help people somehow." Another biker, who everyone called Tiny despite his large size, had been a military mechanic. "I could help teach basic motorcycle and car repair," he offered. "Give the younger vets some job skills." His eyes lit up as he talked about engines and tools. Even Snake came in later that afternoon. He stood awkwardly by Harold's table, his usual toughness gone. "I'm sorry about your garden," he said finally. "And the flag. And the photos. I wasn't thinking straight." Harold could see the pain behind Snake's tough exterior. Mary watched all this from behind her counter, amazed at how her diner had become a place of healing. She brought out free coffee and her famous apple pie for everyone. "On the house," she said, "for all our veterans." As the day went on, Harold and the bikers started making real plans. They spread papers across the table, drawing up ideas for the new veteran center. The garage was big enough for a workshop, a meeting room, and a small coffee shop. They could keep part of it for motorcycle repairs, teaching job skills while earning money for the center. Officer Parker stopped by and offered to help with the legal paperwork. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop suggested starting a small garden behind the garage where veterans could learn about growing things. "Working with plants can be very healing," she said, speaking from her experience with her own veteran husband. The high school principal, Mr. Watson, offered to connect them with veterans who needed help finishing their education. The owner of the local construction company said he'd hire veterans who completed the center's training programs. By evening, what had started as Harold's simple offer had grown into something much bigger. The whole town was getting involved, offering help, donations, and support. The bikers, who had felt like outsiders for so long, were amazed by the community's response. As the sun was setting, Harold stood up slowly from his booth. His legs were tired from sitting all day, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Big Mike and several other bikers immediately stepped forward to help him. "We'll start cleaning up the garage tomorrow," Big Mike said. "And Snake here wants to help fix your garden first thing in the morning." Snake nodded, looking embarrassed but determined. Harold smiled as he looked around at all the faces, both old and young. He saw something in their eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. Sometimes, he thought, the best way to heal your own wounds is to help others heal theirs. Walking home that evening, Harold heard the sound of motorcycles behind him. But this time, instead of feeling afraid, he turned and waved. The bikers waved back, revving their engines in a friendly salute to their new friend and mentor. The transformation began early the next morning. When Harold stepped out of his house at 6 a.m., he was surprised to find Snake and several other bikers already waiting in his front yard. They had brought gardening tools, new plants, and a brand new American flag. "We want to fix what we destroyed," Snake said, looking uncomfortable but determined. He held a rose bush in his hands, similar to the ones they had torn up. Harold noticed that Snake's knuckles were scraped from cleaning the garage late into the previous night. As they worked in the garden, Snake started talking. He told Harold about his time in Afghanistan, about the friend he lost there, and about how hard it was to sleep at night. Harold listened quietly, remembering his own wartime stories. Sometimes he shared a memory from World War II, and the younger veteran would nod in understanding. By mid-morning, more bikers had arrived to help. Jeff, the former medic, carefully planted new flowers, explaining how gardening helped him deal with his anxiety. Tiny used his mechanical skills to fix Harold's broken garden gate, making it work better than before. Around 9 a.m., Mary arrived with breakfast for everyone. She had closed the diner for the morning so she could bring food to the workers. The sight of tough-looking bikers sitting on Harold's porch, eating pancakes and talking with the old veteran, made her smile. While they ate, Harold shared more stories from his time after the war. He told them how Martha had helped him through the nightmares, how working in the garden had given him peace, and how helping others had finally made him feel whole again. The bikers listened intently, seeing their own struggles reflected in his words. After breakfast, Big Mike arrived with news. He had contacted other veteran motorcycle clubs in nearby towns. Many were excited about Harold's idea and wanted to help. Some offered to send members who could teach different skills at the center. Others promised to spread the word to veterans who needed help. This could be bigger than we thought, Big Mike told Harold. We could help hundreds of veterans. Harold nodded, remembering how lonely he had felt after the war. Now he could help make sure other veterans didn't feel the same way. The work continued at both locations, Harold's garden and the garage. Some bikers stayed to finish replanting the garden, while others went to clean the garage. The sound of motorcycles was still there, but now it meant something different to Harold. It was the sound of healing, of people coming together. In the afternoon, Officer Parker brought more good news. The town council had met in an emergency session and voted to support the Veteran Center. They would provide free permits and help with utility costs. Local businesses had already pledged donations and job opportunities. Snake, who had stayed in the garden all day, finally finished planting the last rose bush. He stood up, wiping dirt from his hands, and looked at what they had accomplished. The garden was even more beautiful than before. The new flag flew proudly, and fresh flowers bloomed everywhere. Mr. Thompson, Snake said, his voice rough with emotion, I've been angry for so long. But working here today, listening to your stories, it's the first time in years I've felt peaceful. Harold patted the younger veteran's shoulder, understanding exactly what he meant. As the day drew to a close, Harold sat on his porch watching the sunset. The bikers had gone to continue working at the garage, but they'd left something special behind. Next to his chair was a leather vest, similar to the ones they wore. On it was a new patch that read, Honorary Steel Wolf, Veteran Mentor. Harold touched the vest gently, remembering another piece of military clothing from long ago, his old uniform. Both represented brotherhood, service, and belonging. But this vest represented something more. It showed that even at 93, he could still make a difference in people's lives. That night, for the first time in years, Harold dreamed of Martha. In his dream, she was smiling, tending to their garden. You did good, Harold, she seemed to say. You turned something bad into something beautiful. Harold slept peacefully, knowing that tomorrow would bring more work, more stories, and more healing. 1 month after Harold's big decision, the Veteran Center was ready to open. The old garage had changed so much that people could hardly recognize it. The bikers had worked every day, transforming the building inside and out. The outside walls, once covered in graffiti, now displayed a beautiful mural of the American flag with symbols from all military branches. Local artist Ms. Rodriguez had helped the veterans paint it, letting each one add something special to represent their service. Inside, the garage was split into different areas. One side still had space for motorcycle repairs, where Tiny would teach mechanics to veterans wanting to learn a trade. Another area had comfortable chairs and coffee tables, making a peaceful place for veterans to gather and talk. Jeff, the former medic, had set up a small medical corner where he could check blood pressure and help veterans connect with proper health care. He wasn't ready to work in a hospital yet, but this small clinic helped him slowly return to the medical work he loved. The back of the garage had been turned into a workshop. Here, Veterans could learn different skills like woodworking, basic home repair, and even computer use. Local business owners came in to teach classes and offer job opportunities to those who completed training. Snake, who had surprised everyone with his dedication, created a special quiet room. He painted it in calm colors and filled it with comfortable chairs. Sometimes we just need a place to sit quietly, he explained to Harold. A place where nobody judges us for needing a break. On opening day, Harold arrived early wearing his new leather vest over his best suit. The bikers had installed a special ramp so he could walk into the building more easily. Inside, everything was ready for the big celebration. Mary had brought food from her diner, setting up a buffet of sandwiches and her famous pies. Mrs. Chen's flowers decorated every table, and Mr. Rodriguez from the hardware store had donated new tools for the workshop. At 10 a.m., people started arriving. Veterans from all over the county came to see the new center. Some brought their families, others came alone, but all were welcomed by the Steel Wolves with respect and understanding. Big Mike gave tours of the building, proudly showing off each area. He explained how veterans could join different programs, get help with paperwork, or just come to talk with others who understood their experiences. One of the most popular spots was the Wall of Service. Harold had suggested creating a place where veterans could share photos from their service time. Now, pictures from World War II hung next to photos from Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. It showed how veterans from different wars still shared the same experiences and feelings. During the celebration, Snake stood up to make a speech. The tough biker who had once bullied Harold now spoke with tears in his eyes. "A month ago, I was angry at the world," he said. "Then this 93-year-old man taught us that it's never too late to change. He showed us that the best way to heal ourselves is to help others heal." Harold sat in a comfortable chair near the entrance, watching everything with a happy smile. Veterans of all ages came to talk with him, sharing stories and asking for advice. Many wanted to hear about how he had dealt with his own post-war struggles. The local newspaper came to take pictures and write a story about the center. They took a special photo of Harold surrounded by the Steel Wolves, all wearing their vests and smiling proudly. The headline would read, "World War II Veteran Transforms Local Motorcycle Club into Veterans Support Group." As the day went on, more veterans signed up for programs. Some wanted to learn mechanics from Tiny, others were interested in the job training classes. Many just seemed happy to find a place where they felt understood. By evening, when most people had left, Harold sat with Big Mike and Snake in the quiet room. Big Mike said, "What started as us bullying you has turned into the best thing that ever happened to us." Harold smiled, remembering how Martha always said that love and understanding could change anyone. The sound of motorcycles outside was now a comfort to Harold. It meant that his new family of veterans was nearby, ready to support each other and help more veterans find their way home. 6 months after the Veteran Center opened, Harold sat in his usual spot at Mary's diner, drinking his morning coffee. But now he wasn't alone. Several Steel Wolves members joined him every morning, eager to share updates about the center and hear more of his stories. The Veteran Center had become famous in the region. News channels had come to film stories about how a 93-year-old veteran had transformed a group of troubled bikers into a force for good. Other towns were trying to copy their program, asking Harold and the Steel Wolves for advice. Snake, once the angriest of the bikers, had changed the most. He now led a support group for veterans dealing with combat stress. "If you told me 6 months ago that I'd be helping other vets talk about their feelings," he told Harold, "I would have laughed. Now it's the most important thing in my life." The garage's workshop was always busy. Tiny's mechanics class had helped 20 veterans find jobs at local auto shops. Jeff's medical corner had connected dozens of veterans with proper health care. The quiet room Snake created had become a peaceful haven for veterans needing a break from the world. Harold's garden had also transformed. The bikers took turns helping him tend it, learning how working with plants could calm their minds. They added a small memorial section with plaques honoring fallen soldiers from all wars. Veterans' families often visited to leave flowers and find peace. One morning, Big Mike brought exciting news. The governor had heard about their success and wanted to visit the center. "They're talking about using our program as a model for the whole state," he said proudly. Harold smiled, remembering how it all started with a simple decision to respond to hatred with understanding. The center had also helped the bikers rebuild their lives. Snake had gotten a job as a counselor at the VA hospital. Jeff was taking classes to renew his medical license. Tiny had opened a small motorcycle repair school, teaching veterans job skills while earning money for the center. Even the town had changed. People who once crossed the street to avoid the bikers now greeted them warmly. The Steel Wolves organized charity rides, raising money for veteran causes. Local businesses competed to hire veterans who completed the center's training programs. On Harold's 94th birthday, the Steel Wolves organized a surprise party at the center. Veterans from all over the state came to celebrate. The mayor presented Harold with a key to the city, but the best gift came from Snake and the other bikers. They had created a scholarship program in Harold's name. Every year, it would help veterans' children go to college, because healing doesn't just stop with us, Snake explained. It continues with our families and the next generation. During the party, Harold looked around at all the lives that had changed. The angry bikers had become respected community leaders. Troubled veterans had found purpose and peace. The town had united to support them all. Mary brought a special birthday cake to the center, decorated with both military and motorcycle themes. As everyone sang happy birthday, Harold thought about Martha. She would have loved seeing how her garden had become a place of healing, how her kind approach to helping others had spread so far. That evening, after the party, Harold sat in his garden with Big Mike and Snake. The sound of motorcycles in the distance no longer meant trouble, it meant family coming home. "You know what's funny?" Snake said quietly. "We thought we were tough guys bullying an old man. Turns out you were the strongest one of all. You fought in a war, dealt with its scars, and still had enough love left to help us change our lives." Harold looked at his garden, at the new flag flying proudly, at the memorial plaques glinting in the sunset. He thought about how fear can turn to anger, but anger can also turn to healing if someone is brave enough to take the first step. "Strength isn't about being tough," Harold said, sharing one last piece of wisdom. "It's about being brave enough to help others, even when they've hurt you. Because in the end, we're all fighting our own battles, and we all need someone to understand us." As the sun set on another day at the Veterans Center, Harold Thompson, the 94-year-old veteran who changed everything, sat contentedly among his unlikely family of bikers. Sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best decisions, and sometimes the people who seem the most different turn out to be the ones who understand you the most.